Hello, welcome to this review of Colony by Rob Grant. Now this is a comic science fiction, a humorous comedic science fiction book. I don't tend to read that much comic science fiction. There's a few notorious exceptions to this rule, and Rob Grant here and now is one of them. Now the other thing that Colony is it's a generation starship type scenario. I very much like generation starships. I read quite a few of them. The comic element is one that I'll get into a bit later. So if you're thinking of reading this book, the first thing that I would suggest is you ignore everything on the back, which tells you that it's all about the generation starship, but in actual fact it starts quite differently. We start with our main protagonist, Eddie. Eddie is basically your classic accountant. He has striven mightily his whole life to be the most uninteresting, boring individual with the most uninteresting, boring lifestyle, and he's doing quite well at this ambitious plan. Until one day when he's at work and he looks at the computer and all of a sudden a whole heap of funds vanish from the account that he is working on. Now we gather the feeling that this account actually belongs to some very nasty people that could do some pretty horrible things to him. Eddie panics a bit, and what he does is he liquidates all his property, turns it into money, and turns to a gambling city in order to win back the money that he now owes to this other people, because that's such a good idea and it always works. When we first meet Eddie, he's in the hotel of a casino, despondent, having lost all his money. All he's got is this 150 credit token that some high roller flung him out of pity when he saw that he'd lost everything. He has this room because the casino gives rooms to people who have just lost everything. Anyway, there's a whole heap of interesting stuff that happens at this point, and it involves Eddie's terrified of being hunted down and having his legs broken or horrible things done to him. These guys break in who are obviously in the leg-breaking business. But on checking their list, they find out that Eddie isn't in fact their next target, so they go off to look for them. Eddie goes down to the casino with his sad soul 50 credit chip, and he's wandering around when he sees an illuminated sign saying, "Eddie, win here," or something like that. He goes to this table and he finds a real high roller who is winning time after time, just impossible wins. And he basically puts his 50 credit token on this guy's square and he wins, and he keeps piggybacking with this guy. But eventually he gets cold feet. And even though the high roller keeps going and keeps winning, Eddie stumbles away with not quite enough money to pay back his employers, but close. He goes up to the window of the casino and decides not to cash it all just yet. He cashes some of it. And he goes off to do other things when he finds that, in fact, this high roller broke their casino. No more money is forthcoming, and he deeply regrets not having cashed it all. He stumbles out into the night, bound for leg breaking and other worse things to happen to him. And he goes into a bar of this town. Now, a word on this casino town. Imagine Las Vegas, if you will. I personally have never been there, but I've heard about it. Only this casino town, whose name I can't remember, and it doesn't really much matter, is built in the middle of a glacier, and it's got a dome, I believe, keeping the glaciation back, and it's a very temporary town. It has been built for a very short time. Is it 24 hours or is it 48 hours worth of celebration before the colony ship leaves? This colony ship, called the Willflower, is carrying the brightest and the best of mankind who are going to go to the stars, since mankind has so completely wrecked this planet that there's no hope for us on it. Eddie obviously was never invited or considered for this brightest and best generation ship that will travel into the stars and may one day land on a planet and continue the human race elsewhere. But as he stumbles away from the casino, broke and in imminent danger of the end of his life, he stumbles into a dark bar in this town where he meets the actual high roller that broke the casino. This individual is meant to go on the colony ship. But now that he's a multi-millionaire, he doesn't want to anymore. He doesn't want to suffer a whole lifetime of privation following rules. He wants to take his money and go and live it up with sex, drugs, and rock and rolls for the rest of his life. Or until planet Earth becomes nothing. Fair enough, you say. What he wants Eddie to do is to take a brief paper of who he is and what he's doing on the ship and go in his place. And this is indeed what happens. Now, all of that is part one, and it's not a significantly large part of the book. It's, I think, about so much of the book is all this. Eddie gets on the ship, we won't get into that. And once on the ship, he discovers there's some very weird things about it. It's been designed as a sociological experiment, virtually, with all the positions being hereditary. So you've got a hereditary priest, a hereditary captain, a hereditary social planner. Because the guy that pushed Eddie into this position wasn't entirely honest about his position on the generation ship. He is the actual social planner. Everything on the ship is essentially his fault. And it sounds more and more regulated and more autocratic and less likable. And this middle bit, Generation 1, is where we hear about the ship and what's happening with it. And we establish Eddie and the other characters, and there's a lot more humour. And then, I'm not going to tell you how, but Eddie basically vanishes out of the picture for a while. And when he re-emerges, because he's our sole point of view, it's not first person point of view, it's third person, but he's our sole point of view. When he re-emerges, it's 10 generations later. And the result of all this careful planning is coming to fruition. You've got a teenage pimply captain who says things like Jonovich, and is basically there to be annoying. There is a science captain born and trained to science from birth who's decided that she believes in religion. She likes self-flagellating if ever she does anything wrong, and she doesn't believe in science. You've got a hereditary priest who encourages the self-flagellation of this individual, but is essentially an atheist, and his hobby is taking saucy videos of everyone on board and then using that as blackmail material. So into this merry crew, Eddie emerges. Eddie's accident meant that he doesn't have a body, and he's been grafted into this mechanical thing where his head and his spinal cord, all that's left of him, in a jar of green goo, and there's some covers actually show that. Mine doesn't. He's got crab-like pincers with a carapace of, I believe, blue, and he's got these block-like feet. He's been resurrected using a process that they've only just managed to get to kind of work. Maybe it's not working on him too well. And they've done that because they're desperate. The ship has lost 2 of its 3 engines. It's bent on destruction. They need someone to help them because this rigid social environment has ended up with the best of the best, maybe not, being the stupidest of the stupid. They can't even read. They needed to resurrect someone who could read. But because their basic skills are so poor, they're not even sure who they've resurrected. They think Eddie is someone other than the person who's impersonating the first time. And this gives you a good idea about the level of complexity that Rob Grant has written into his humour. Now, Eddie does indeed pick up the gauntlet with his pincers that aren't well wired into his system, and tries to save the generation ship and indeed his own life and everyone on it. But now's the point to talk about the elephant in the room for many of us of my generation. Rob Grant is indeed the Rob Grant that many of us will know from Grant Naylor and Red Dwarf. Now, he probably wouldn't be delighted that I'm bringing up this topic, but the honest truth is that if Rob Grant wasn't from Red Dwarf, I wouldn't have picked this up. Comedy isn't really my thing. Even very British comedy like this, which I don't mind, would not be my first choice of reading material, and yet I bought this. Rob Grant, Red Dwarf, Grant Naylor. Now, the Times describes this book as cruel, cynical, and very funny. The Times is dead right about the cynical and cruel, especially the first bit. The first bit was very jarring for me because the writing, the intonation, the sentence structure, so much of the humour is pure Red Dwarf, but it is harsh. It is much darker than Red Dwarf, which always had a twist of fun about it. Now, once we get onto the actual generation ship, the writing improves and gets more and more fun, more and more enjoyable. But this was a slow book to read, especially at first because it was so very, I've got to say at times, quite nasty. Now, a bit of research on the internet indicates that, as many of us know, from the mid-80s to the mid-90s, Grant Naylor were the gestalt of Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and they did Red Dwarf. They did a lot of other shows as well, but Red Dwarf was my lodestar. I remember the first time I saw any of it, it was on television late at night. I was at a party. I watched it in fascination, said, what on earth is this? And I was instantly hooked. For years, I would watch the one Red Dwarf show that was aired on television the week. I'd record it on VHS, for those of us who even remember what that is. And then I would keep on watching that episode at regular basis as comfort watch until the next one appeared. So Red Dwarf was very, very much a part of the humour and science fiction of younger me. Rob Grant and Doug Naylor split into individuals. Sometimes I'm pretty sure in the late 90s. I don't think that anyone really knows why. Doug Naylor in interviews has indicated that he doesn't know. Rob Grant has indicated nothing at all. Doug Naylor continued going with Red Dwarf, which went on to do more seasons. Rob Grant split off to do other things. And Colony, published or copyrighted at least in 2000, was the first thing that he did after that split. I mention all this because it may explain some of the darkness and some of the true bitter cynicism in here. Whatever was happening in his life that led to the Red Dwarf split, the artistic divorce, if you will, probably led to a lot of the attitude in this early book. But later, the Red Dwarfisms, the sentence structure, the humour became less obvious, the writing became more individualistic, and it got funnier and easier to read. By the end, it was indeed very funny. Towards the front it was more the cruel, cynical. So there's pluses and minuses. Now, the whole humour in the later bit, which is this crew of inept, impossible people, including Styx is the muscle of the expedition, and rather than have many people, they just clone him over and over again. So Styx A through to I or H or something. There's a lot in this book, and a lot of it is very interesting, very well done, and very science fiction. So it is enjoyable. Will I read it again? Well, there's a possibility that I will. Because it is quite full of material, I think it's one that you can reread and still discover more about it. What else? I will just say, Red Dwarf, Grant Naylor, was one of my problems when I alphabetized my shelves last year. Alphabetizing by author meant that a gestalt like Grant Naylor was hard to position. So I ended up positioning Red Dwarf as Grant, G for Grant, because it's the first surname on the cover, and also because I had a couple of Rob Grant's books. This will join the G's, and Doug Naylor is off on his own under the N's, which proves somewhat ironic, since the two individuals, Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, who brought me what is still my favourite comic TV show ever, are now artistically divorced, if you will. Anyhow, thank you very much for watching. Colony is well worth reading if you like British humour. It's well worth reading if you like generation ships, just for a good overview of everything that can go wrong and which can be solved in a unique way. Aha, I have done no spoilers, and I'm not going to tell you how it solves, but The solution is very much not Deus Ex Machina. It's very much in future science fiction concept, and it explains all the things throughout the book that you're going, well, wait, it's all explained at the end. Quite a great book, and I think thinking back over it is going to be enjoyable, and that's why I suspect I will eventually reread that one. Now, as a final cut, I'm going to do something that I haven't done before. We're going to end with some music. It's going to be the theme song from Red Dwarf, because that theme song still makes me just so happy. Thank you for watching. Read good books. Watch Red Dwarf.